Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking a little time to join us this morning. I think this is going to be a really interesting session. We had a lot of interest in this topic, so we're really looking forward to hearing from Marie this morning. I just want to say good morning. My name is Nora Fever, and I work with Gros Morne Institute for Sustainable Tourism. And we've been partnering with Festivals and Events Ontario for a couple of years now to offer these great festivals and events webinars, and we've had some wonderful sessions, and I'm sure today is not going to be an exception to that. It's a great partnership, and we're really fortunate to be able to keep working on that partnership and to be able to keep offering these great topics for all of you. I'm not going to have too much to say. I'm going to turn it over to our host for the morning, who is Debbie Mann from FEO. She will introduce herself, I'm sure, and we're going to have her lead us through this great session. Over to you, Debbie.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nora. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. My name is, as Nora said, Debbie Mann. I've been with Festivals and Events Ontario for 20 years now and have been doing what we call Tuesday Talks since the pandemic, and that's how Nora and I met through those, and have been excited to support GMIST in these educational sessions. Today we have Marie Zimmerman from our regional tourism organization FEO here in Ontario. I've known Marie for many years now in her past life as a festival director, running a number of different events within the province of Ontario. And she's now the director of programs and partnerships for the regional tourism organization FEO, and has I'm looking forward to hearing what her presentation is and learning about this, bringing tourism as a draw to your region. So, Marie, over to you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much to Nora and GMIST and to Debbie and Jay from FEO for having me today. As Debbie said, I work as the Director of Projects and Partnerships at what's called RTO4. I used to work in festival and events for over 20 years. I grew up in Quebec, so I'm very familiar with Carnival and loved that. I have also worked and lived in Winnipeg, enjoying the dance festivals there and the New Music Festival. And I've traveled to many festivals, including the Dawson City Music Festival in the Yukon and the Edinburgh festivals and Iceland Airwaves festivals. I've worked for 5 different festivals, 6 actually. So my thoughts today are based on that experience. All of these festivals wanted to attract more visitors. So today I'm just going to talk about trying to transform a community festival into a tourism attraction so that you can boost a local economy and have greater cultural visibility. It's really important to start off by noting how you must very carefully navigate that transformation so that you can preserve your community's unique identity and the values remain intact. So I'll explore how you balance growth with authenticity and trying to create an experience that resonates with both the locals and visitors while honoring, how the festival started in the first place. So this is just generally the outline of what I'm going to do. I'm starting with the negative, which I hope doesn't reflect poorly on my personality, but I want to look at some of the problems that you can encounter. Then I wanted to address community festival identity, growth and authenticity, how to involve the community, and then about attracting visitors, strategies of innovative programming, storytelling, and collaborative marketing, and co-presenting. So here I go, starting with what could possibly go wrong. Typically what happens is if you ignore your residents and you ignore your community, a certain amount of alienation erupts. The community no longer feels an attachment to what tourists are coming to see. tourists end up being resented for taking over, natural spaces and things like that. As we've recently seen in Barcelona, as residents are taking water pistols to tourists. But anyway, just a few quick examples. Niagara Falls is often cited as a destination with very little community connection. A lot of tourists say that it just seems very corporate, that the hotels are owned by large corporations, and the attractions other than the falls are cheap, or they seem sensationalized, and they seem to be unrelated to the community. There are some very good community embedded local festivals in the region, the Shaw Festival, which is a theater festival. There are wine festivals and vineyards. There's a peach festival. And so a lot of people say that that should be integrated with Niagara Falls as a destination. Another example is the infamous Fire Festival that everybody knows about, I'm sure, from 2017. It was marketed as a luxury music festival on a private island in the Bahamas. And it targeted wealthy international attendees through social media campaigns and influencers who were often, models and actresses and stuff. So it promised a very high-end experience with gourmet food and luxury accommodations and these major music acts. But as you'll see in the picture there, that's what the luxury accommodations looked like. And people were disappointed when they received sandwiches in plastic baggies. So the festival was canceled even as people arrived, and it failed. But one of the reasons that it failed was that it didn't connect with local residents and businesses in the planning process. Even the local contractors remained unpaid, and the residents and businesses were left to clean up the mess after the collapse of the festival. So they weren't consulted, they weren't involved in the strategic planning. There was a lot of infrastructure that was brought in for the festival that could have been made on site by the residents in the community. And another example is the Sled Island Festival. This is not an example of failure, but an example of a festival that actually rose to the occasion. So this festival is in Calgary, and the Calgary Stampede has had a lot of success because it has basically built a big festival on the preoccupations and passions of its community, the ranching and agricultural interests in particular. The Sled Island Music and Arts Festival in Calgary didn't fail so much, but there was this sort of misalignment with the local audience expectations. It wanted to be a highly experimental and avant-garde event, but the Calgary audience was more mainstream in its musical tastes. And so the festival ended up shifting its programming to adapt to the community and the local music scene. And so it avoided sort of the crash and burn cycle that you see. So all of this is to point out that, in your risk management planning and your financial planning, you need to look at what happens if residents don't embrace your festival. So this is about trying to understand community festival identity. And these are all of the things that you sort of need to think about, cultural heritage and passions and preoccupations, the quirkiness of your community, its traditions, collaborations, its sites, and its architecture. So I'm going to try and be more positive now. It's giving you examples. A festival that I worked with for about 14 years is the Hillside Festival, and it's a music festival which was started in 1984. It has an Indigenous circle. It has a passion for alternative agriculture, medicine, sustainability. All of those things were reflective of Guelph itself, Guelph, Ontario. As a city, Guelph, Ontario has the University of Guelph, where there's the OVC, which is Ontario Veterinary College, and the Ontario Agricultural College. So there's this grounding in a love of land and animals. The community is also a music city. So the festival, the Hillside Festival itself, had to reflect all of those things about its community in order to stay relevant. The artistic director of Hillside was born in Bombay. He grew up in Southern Ontario. He had very wide-ranging musical tastes, and so he basically programmed a festival that was well ahead of its time in terms of its diversity, in terms of genre, musical genre and acts, international and so on. He did take some flack for the fact that he moved the festival away from being just a folk festival. But, he would argue that that was just in keeping with the way in which contemporary music was moving anyway. So how does the community stay involved in Hillside? Well, they participate as musicians, as performers, as workshop facilitators, as volunteers, and as food and craft vendors. The summer festival itself takes place on an island, so we saw that as a kind of metaphor for the world and attempted to make it a zero carbon festival over 40 years of work. Last year, it won the TIO, which is Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, Sustainability Award. It's also won 14 other awards for sustainability. I worked on carbon measurement and other environmental initiatives, as well as themed festivals to respond to what I saw as the community's passions and its heritage. So the LGBTQ community is very strong. The active transportation community is very strong. So the programming reflected that. In terms of active transportation, I would collaborate with the local off-road bicycling associations and ask them to coordinate as volunteers, bicycle brigades out to the island. So the island is in Guelph Lake Conservation Area, which is 10 kilometers outside the city center of Guelph. And so it's kind of a hilly region. So at night, the festival finished at 11 o'clock, and this off-road bicycling association would lead all of the cyclists out of this very dark conservation area safely back to the lights of the downtown Guelph. But some of the things that I did, I worked on programming with the artistic director to make sure that it remained relevant. So I did themes of art as activism, and that I moved into developing a theme called Counter Hate with Beauty that celebrated the way in which art can move you. It doesn't have to be politically and really demonstrative, but it can be quietly culture changing. I did another theme on stories that need to be told to sort of elevate voices in the community that were somewhat peripheralized. I did programming like Queers on Quebec Street, Girls and Guitars, The Sound of Light, which was focusing on Black musicians in the community and beyond. So the attendees of that festival also end up being ambassadors for the festival because they feel that it reflects their interests in social justice, their interests in sustainability. So any efforts that we made to turn the festival into more of a tourism draw were met with applause rather than scorn, which was terrific, because it was an opportunity to educate and to share sustainable practices and to share the architecture of an island, which many people saw as a utopia. It was an alternative way of being. It reflected the passions of the community, which were on full display. So there's something about trying to turn your community festival into a tourism draw that involves the rule of three. And I hear the rule of three quite frequently. There's lots of rules or principles in tourism. You know, there's one about if you ask a visitor to travel 1 hour to your destination or your event, you should have at least 3 hours of activities and that kind of thing. But what the rule of three here means is clustering multiple kind of complementary experiences together to increase the appeal of a destination. And it ensures that visitors can find like enough to do without having to travel very long distances between activities. So, for example, a town might cluster like a local farmer's market, a small history museum, a local artisan gallery, or a scenic hiking trail, and a seasonal festival all together. And that combination makes the town much more attractive as a weekend getaway. Some examples, if you're just looking at the rule of three, that Hillside had activism, music, and food. The food was all healthy food. There were no franchise options available. They were almost all local caterers or restaurants offering the food. The Writers' Festival in Eden Mills, which is the village where I live, offered literature, a very pretty village setting on the river, and it offered workshops. The Iceland Airways Festival offered music and literature and also nature, and like these incredible geothermal pools that you can soak in. And the Edinburgh Festival offered theater, arts, and nature as well. You know, you can go up to Arthur's Seat, right in the town, practically. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the spectrum, because funders often talk about this spectrum of festivals, that they start out as local, like community festivals, they move into emerging festivals, and then the idea is that they become mature. And funders speak about that spectrum, and it can sort of sound like it's a trajectory that's, you know, it moves you toward like nirvana or plenitude or self-actualization or something. From a provincial or federal funder's point of view, a mature festival can attract more visitors and deliver economic benefits, obviously, to the host community more than a local community festival can, or an emerging festival can. But from my point of view, there has to be really good reasons to be on that journey. And it must be a journey that's carefully monitored, because you can forget why you started in the first place. So one of the reasons to begin that journey of moving toward a tourism draw or more mature festival is economic. Economic motivation is the primary one. A couple of examples: the Stratford Festival in Ontario started in 1953 as a way to revitalize the town itself, which was facing economic decline after its primary industry, which was the railway, began to diminish. And it basically drew on just a couple of things: the town's sort of nominal link to Stratford-upon-Avon in England, as well as a love of community theater among its people. And that's a huge success story, obviously. Another great success story is Iceland, Reykjavik. Iceland was on the brink of bankruptcy in 2008, and it introduced a lot of measures, obviously, to prevent it itself from crashing and burning. But one of them seemed bizarre, and that was that it built the Harpa Concert Hall in 2011, which seemed to so many people completely counterintuitive. You know, you're going bankrupt. Why on earth are you hiring this famous architect to build this absolutely gorgeous concert hall? But the decision was based on their faith in the power of their people's talents to draw visitors. People in Iceland play music. Like something like over 80% of people play a musical instrument, and 10% of them are published. They love poetry, they love literature. So the Iceland Airways Festival itself started in 1999, and it was a very grassroots showcase of just local Icelandic bands that was held in this airplane hangar in Reykjavik. And they started to promote it to international visitors in order to get themselves, out of the rut that they were in financially. So the key differences between Iceland Airwaves in its early years and Iceland Airwaves later as a tourist attraction have to do with scale and audience and lineup and economic impact. But it was able to sort of maintain a balance between its very intimate local roots and its appeal to international visitors. And that's been crucial to its success. It typically draws around 6,000 to 8,000 attendees per year. So it's still quite a small festival, but that includes both local attendees and international visitors. But it has this very community-focused atmosphere. It's very intimate. They use all sorts of like venues, businesses downtown that you can go into to hear a poetry reading or to hear music, and they involve so many different Icelandic performers, poets, musicians, bands. So it makes it a really community-centric, but also really interesting festival for visitors, because you feel like you're getting a cultural education at the same time as you are attending a festival with international acts. Out of their like 6,000 to 8,000 attendees, roughly 50% are international visitors. So those international visitors are obviously an important part of Iceland's tourism strategy, and they've contributed substantially to Reykjavik's economy and their recovery. So their strategy paid off. Tourism exploded from around 500,000 visitors in 2010 to over 2 million by 2017. And that increase in tourism helped to offset all of the economic damage that was caused by the banking collapse. And it provided jobs and brought foreign currency, obviously, into the country. So this is a little bit about the delicate balance between growth and authenticity, and how to manage it. Obviously, I've already talked about aligning with local cultural passions, which Iceland Airwaves does really well, and Hillside did really well, or does really well, and actively involve the community. In terms of cultural passions, when I lived in Winnipeg, I was impressed with the number of hobbies that people had there. In winter, like, people pursue their hobbies with their friends. They hunker down, because the winter is just so severe in some cases. It's regularly minus 35. But if you're interested in knitting and golf, well, you might get together with your friends over the winter to, I don't know, knit golf bags or something like that. So there isn't this sense that you should just watch TV. There's a passion there for doing really unique things. So one of the things that I can't emphasize enough is how you should actively involve your community, not just in the practical things, not just having somebody drive a golf cart or pour wine or whatever, but have your community be actively involved in planning the festival. Put them on your strategic planning committee. Present local stories that resonate globally for people. There must be local stories that you can tell about your region, or legends, or tales or folk tales that you can tell about your region. that will resonate with other people. I think about Harryman, the local Newfoundland story about the Newfoundland dog in Grace Bay. And I always loved that story as a child, and my children loved it too. There's a story, Come From Away, of course. Um, and then finally turn the city, your village or your town into a venue. And that's a way of keeping the community actively involved, because it has obviously economic benefits for all of the businesses that are involved. So with Hillside Inside, which is the winter version of the Hillside Summer Festival, I would just basically use a whole bunch of different businesses as venues, and I would plot out something like Queers on Quebec Street or Girls and Guitars, where I planned them as progressive parties, and so people would come, and every half hour the venue would change, and so would the performer. And so you get to walk around the downtown. But what else, there's all kinds of other things that are there in the downtown, such as, art galleries and museums and so on and so forth. But it was a beautiful way of sort of including surprise, because these things were not, people didn't expect they would be shopping, and suddenly somebody would start singing and playing guitar and rocking it out in the storefront window of a business. And it was really helpful for the artists, because it gave them opportunities to sell their music to people, and their merch, and to get more exposure and more fans. This is something that the Edinburgh Fringe Festival does as well. Puts performances in unusual spaces, and Iceland Airways does that too. And so I learned from Iceland Airways that, like, one of the great things that they did was that they would put speakers out, even though it was really cold in November when they run their festival. They put the speakers outside, and then so that people who are just passing by would want to go into the store to hear the band or whatever. Actively involve your community. So the first thing I put there was to avoid staff deification. So sometimes festivals fail because the artistic director is kind of deified, that they have a vision for this particular festival, and the festival is imposed on the community. And the community is told that they really need to step up and enjoy this niche art form or whatever. And that often doesn't work, and that's often one of the reasons why festivals fail, because they can't get traction in the community, and they can't get businesses to back them up. Start committees and welcome ideas. Remain open, because your community is the place where people have skills and talents and strengths and ideas for how to bring more visitors in, or how to promote something, how to run a bike brigade, how to build things. So this is an example of an older volunteer at Hillside, and a lot of people underestimated him. And he actually built all these trash turnarounds himself. And he has no carpentry training or anything like that. In fact, he's a retired teacher, but he has been like an incredible force. When I was doing carbon measurement and I had to measure all the compost, and we were digging compost hills on the conservation site, he was right in there. He would be shoveling in the compost pits. He would be showing people how to weigh the compost and everything. So be multi-generational. You need to keep young people involved, because they're going to be obviously the future leaders of your festival in your community. And Hillside's really good insofar as it has become like a family event, and multiple generations come together to celebrate. Hillside has, or had when I was there a year ago, 21 committees, 1,300 volunteers, And of those 1,300 volunteers, about 98 of them are coordinators, who are volunteers who manage crews. And the crews are anywhere from 20 people to 74 people, who tackle, manage different areas of the festival. So it's a huge investment in the community. A couple of other things to think about is showcasing local artists and youth artists. This seems really obvious, but one of the things that our artistic director did at Hillside was he would put local artists on the same stage as very high profile national or international artists. So there would be this sort of groundswell of interest in how that local performer is going to do on stage with all of these higher profile acts. And then I started a youth showcase probably about 11 years ago at Hillside. And it was it was just, basically I just wanted to showcase the incredible talent that there was in the community. But one of the things that came out of that was the fact that it is itself part of the tourism draw, in that the young students who were performing had their parents come, but then their aunts and uncles come and their grandparents come, and these are people who live from away, and so they would come to stay in the place, and that's how they got to know both the festival but the community as well. Then I've got hire a warm volunteer manager. At first I put hire a strict volunteer manager. You should hire a strict and warm volunteer manager, because that person is going to keep their pulse on the community. How are people feeling about their contributions to the festival? Are they getting enough benefit from this? Do they feel heard? Do they feel like they have too much work to do? That person has to be somebody who is super positive, optimistic, but loves people. And often, I think, not-for-profit festivals in particular hire volunteer managers who are really good at managing databases. And that's not the same person. If you're lucky enough to hire somebody who can manage a database and be super personable and kind to volunteers, then you're lucky. Yes. Let your volunteers lead. Let them come up with ideas, like encourage them to have a sustainability committee and bring them onto that. And you'd be surprised at the terrific ideas that come out of your community. And then survey your community contributors and have a town hall maybe once a year at the AGM where you talk about some of the things that you're planning to do and ask them to be on committees and things like that. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Eden Mills Writers Festival. I was the artistic director of this festival quite a while ago, but I've been a volunteer for over 20 years. But that festival started with a cluster of writers and visual artists or illustrators who lived in the village. And the festival started when Leon Rook was launching a book that he had written, and he just wanted to launch it on the steps of the general store. But of course, Leon Rook had a ton of friends like Michael Landacci and Margaret Atwood and people like that. And so the festival grew basically within the community of writers and illustrators. Villagers eventually gave up their front yards and their backyards as venues, and now you can walk up and down the village and hear readings by writers and illustrators of books as well. So that's another way in which it has been rooted or remained rooted in the community. So best practices for engaging community, you need to share ownership, and you need to share the benefits, the economic benefits. Ask people for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. but don't just go to them, ask for help, and then you're done. Make sure that they feel that they are part of a community in whatever way that is, that you have volunteer parties or you find ways of bringing them onto committees or whatever. So I've already talked a little bit about the bike brigades, but the whole built environment of the Hillside Festival and the Eden Mills Writers Festival is managed by volunteers who are carpenters and architects and engineers. You can use technicians as volunteers, although you usually need to hire a professional tech group if you're doing a music festival. Theater people make great MCs. Theater students make great MCs in your community. And on the children's stage at Hillside, we would use children as MCs who were budding performers and actors and actresses. I also commandeered knitters and yarn bombers in the community. This group of women who were particularly adept at yarn bombing places. And so at one point, we had a punk band that was coming to Hillside, and we had never put up barricades between the audience and the stage, but our risk management committee was feeling like we really needed to this time because this punk band, the audience had a reputation of rushing the stage, and they were really worried that someone was going to get hurt. So they wanted a barricade up. So we bought those, steel barricades with the horizontal piping. And, but it was a real wet blanket for so many members of the community. And I knew it wouldn't go over particularly well. So I asked the whole bunch of women in the community who were strong knitters to basically create garlands of flowers, crocheted and knitted, and they covered the barricades in that. And, so they felt like they had transformed something that they didn't want, but they understood the utility of it into something that they felt was theirs. And yeah, the other thing you can tap into are amateur historians and local librarians for to tap into legends and stories that you can tell about your place, and tap into cooks and bakers in the village or in your town or your city. So one of the things that the Eden Mills Writers Festival does is on the Sunday of the festival, it's a one-day big festival of readings, they have a community hall dinner for all of the writers. And so it's a fundraiser for the community hall. So all the people in the community come together and prepare a menu. They prepare all this food for, about 100 people, 150 people sometimes, and they bake pies, and it's a very homegrown, very grassroots thing. But it became one of the things that the writers, these are international, national writers, loved most about the festival was that community dinner at the very end. Then obviously, another best practice is to get your providers and your suppliers from your locality, food vendors, craft vendors, get your tents, your porta potties from as local as possible. And one of the things we did at Hillside that was unique and helpful was that at holiday time, we would run a campaign to, buy your tickets to the summer festival now and give them as a gift. But we would tack on $20 to that festival ticket price, and that money would go to a local charity. So the person buying the tickets would feel like, oh, and some of this money is also going to a local charity. And then that charity would be promoting you and would be very grateful to receive that money. So these are just some of the sort of stones you can throw in the water. They have really interesting ripple effects. I've already talked about using the community hall as a venue for the Writers Festival dinner. Having a combination of ticketed and free performances is really important. When I worked for the Guelph contemporary dance festival, we would attract visitors by deliberately staging high-profile dance acts, and this was for a soft seat venue. And so that would bring people in. They would stay overnight because it was 2 days of programming. But then every night or day of the festival, we would have free programming in the park. And there would be dance performances, and people would move from site to site to site. So this is a scene here in that photo. Incredible crowds, both visitors and locals at this. So this is a little bit about local identity. This was a couple of years ago, this photo. And this, the singer there is one of the local artists in Guelph, who was thrilled to be performing here with Ashley McIsaac, who's in red on the left. Again, that kind of programming where you take a local artist and you put them on stage with a very high-profile artist. But I wanted to ask the question to all of you about local identity. You know, what 3 words would you use to describe your place to someone who's never been there? What local stories, traditions, or legends are shared within your community? These are the things that I would be asking myself if I was trying to move a community festival to a tourism draw. What foods, activities, or experiences can only be found in your locality, in your place? Now
Does
we're
anybody
moving.
want to share? You could put it in the chat.
Yeah, you can put it in the chat. We can circle back to it. I'm just, I'm worried that I've taken up a lot of time already. No? Yeah.
You're good on timer.
I'm good on time? Okay. Okay. Attracting visitors. Obviously, you want to market the unique aspects of the festival that appeal to tourists and visitors, your high-profile acts. You want to ticket those events. When people go to a B&B or a hotel, there should be brochures or signs with QR codes about activities and experiences, hopefully discounts too. This is a picture at the Hillside Festival. In 2023, we programmed Daka Braka, which is a Ukrainian band, and people from the Ukrainian Canadian community in our region came to the festival, and we let in newly arrived Ukrainians for free. So as part of Daka Braka's performance, the people from the community made borscht for everyone, and so we served like 300 bowls of borscht to people at the festival from the Ukrainian Canadian community. There's a lot about developing partnerships with local businesses to create package deals for visitors. The BIA and the Chamber are wonderful when it comes to this kind of thing. They'll help you develop those packages, help you identify businesses that could work with you. One of the cool things that we did at the Eden Mills Writers Festival was we would have Writers Festival workshops in the morning, and then a talk in the afternoon, and then the festival would be the next day. So that meant that people were coming on like the Friday night, staying overnight, taking the workshop Saturday morning, the workshops, and then going to the event in the afternoon, and then staying overnight again and going to the festival on Sunday. So they'd make a whole weekend of it. But one of the ways you can kind of knock it out of the park so that they will come is that the workshops themselves could be run by very high profile writers that they wouldn't have an opportunity to see or hear. or at the talk in the afternoon, also very high profile. We worked with the University of Guelph to bring in some really big names to give readings and talks. But what was interesting there, and I forgot to make this point, is that we actually used a hotel in Guelph as the venue for the workshops. And you could just walk across the street to the university to go to the talk in the afternoon, and then the next day go out to the village of Eden Mills for the festival itself. So we made it really convenient for people, and easy for them to get around, and very attractive. Incorporating elements that educate visitors about your culture and traditions. You can incorporate history tours and food tours and farm tours, guided hikes, that sort of thing. We always found it really important to combine spectator activities and participatory activities, because often, like in my studies of, what people expect when they come to a festival, within families, there's quite a wide variety, and there are a lot of people in my family who just like to sit and listen to music, but then there are a lot of people who want to be doing the drumming, want to be doing the dancing, want to be learning new things. And so always think about having that combination of things, and many of them can be facilitated by people within your community. Some examples of innovative programming. So tourism grants can often be used to fund a very high profile artist or a series of artists, but you can't rely on them year after year, because tourism is devoted to the new or the enhanced, right? So you have to be able to show how you're enhancing something year over year. So if you draw people to an event you've created one year, ensure that there are lots of secondary attractions to keep people interested and keep them coming back. So you could have, a culinary fusion, new music genres, jam sessions with local musicians and international figures, workshops with high-profile chefs, and so on. One of the sort of knock it out of the park pieces of programming that I have heard about in my work at the University of Guelph has an institute for International Institute for Critical Studies and Improvisation, and I worked there and worked with Sound Symposium in St. John's, and they have this, Harbor Symphony, and Halifax has a duplicate of this as well, and that's a beautiful event because it draws on the maritime heritage of the community. The love of music and storytelling and everything, and so it's a wonderful tourist draw. But what it is all these ships. I'm sure most of you have heard of this or know this well. All these ships, boats in the harbor are given part of a score, and with the horns on their boats, they sound off and create this beautiful, unusual symphony in that space. When you're focusing on storytelling, you should be focusing on stories about your community that suggest its uniqueness. Also, when you're developing stories about your festival, tell the story of its origins. That often resonates with people. This is an example from this past summer. This play, The Trials of Maggie Pollock, took place at the Blythe Festival in Ontario. And this festival did really well. We helped them promote it this year. But Maggie Pollock was the last woman in Canada put on trial for witchcraft. I think it was about 1919. Can you believe it? 1919, women were still being put on trial for witchcraft. She lived and died in Blythe, Ontario, and so the Blythe Festival commissioned a play about her. They sold out performances, I think, of this and another play about the farmerettes, and it was the first time that they had sold out performances since before the pandemic. So this was a really good recovery thing, but it's sort of a pointed illustration of how telling a story that's a community story can resonate with visitors from much further away. Okay, so what I wanted to do another little piece here about cultural inventory, getting you to jot down unique items in each category related to arts and crafts, music and dance, food and drink, local festivals, natural landscapes, historical events, and community traditions. Just as we go, I'm sure all of you are thinking, like, what could we pair this with? You know, do I have 3 big things that I could attract people to? These are the categories that we usually use, and then we sort of brainstorm, okay, how can this community festival attract, more people? Is there something really unique here? But we can circle back to that because I have just the last piece is about attracting visitors year round and using certain strategies. So I just want to talk to you about this thing called the Fab Five that I worked on over the course of 10 years to promote Guelph as a destination. Brought together 5 different festivals. All of them shared an interest in pushing the boundaries of contemporary art forms, and so they were a natural fit. And so there was this collaboration effort between 2010, 2008 and 2018, 2019. Where we collaborated with each other on marketing the festival together. So this is an example of a postcard that we produce, and we produce them every single year. What was really good about it is that these festivals start, well, the Guelph Contemporary Dance Festival now starts in May, but they span basically the May to November. So it includes a shoulder season, both early spring and late fall, early winter. And so we would produce these postcards, and then people would have something that they could take with them. There were digital versions as well that just kind of promoted the idea that year round you could go to one of these festivals. So we did collaborative marketing. This was an example of, obviously destination branding. We put these ads in things like the Globe and Mail and so on. What was really interesting about this is that we could see over time the sort of local pride that this campaign was instilling in people or developing. So there was collaborative marketing. We also did things like banners that hung from city streetlights. We worked with the BIA and Guelph Tourism on those projects. And we had banners that we put in B&Bs and hotel rooms as well to promote all of these festivals. And then we also did co-presentations. And this was a really important part of the collaborative effort. So each festival added programming to another festival. And what was really great about that is that you don't always have that much of a budget for all of your artistic stuff. And so you'd be asking another festival to come in and program something that they like, but they would be paying the artist fee. You as the host festival would be paying the tech and the hospitality to welcome people and to make sure that the lighting and sound and everything was really great. But we used very innovative approaches. We used art attacks and flash mobs and stuff in order to draw attention in a kind of non-threatening way. We would make very bold statements. So here's some images of some dance performances that erupted. The first one is at a film festival. They just all of a sudden, some dancers grabbed some chairs and performed, and people were very surprised. The second one is at the River Run Center, which is an arts center in Guelph. And this is the beginning of a dance performance where these artists, these dancers move amongst this huge audience that is on intermission. So it's a way of introducing a new art form to a different audience. And it was a very successful campaign. Because it built awareness of the destination as a festival city. It allowed the festivals to come together and get package deals for media. It increased community pride, as I mentioned. There were new partnerships that developed with county tourism, with BIAs, with the food festival. And there were lots of solid marketing pieces that were produced, like I said, the city streetlight banners, the hotel banners, and so on. But the result was that there was an increase in attendance at all of these festivals over several years. So the Eden Mills Writers Festival saw the biggest increase, followed by the Guelph Contemporary Dance Festival, the Guelph Film Festival, and the Guelph Jazz Festival. So these are important, and it helped to sort of sustain these festivals because their name was actually in front of an audience over and over again. And their artistic offerings were in front of different audiences over and over again. So I think I only have a couple more slides, but festival sustainability, I can talk to you a little bit about diversified funding sources, avoiding vision mission creep, and then finally just avoiding the cookie cutter trap. But I think we've covered everything under the cookie cutter trap. So it's really more about festival sustainability. So I have gone on, and so yeah.
That was amazing, Marie. Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody, we have a couple of minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? You know, and interrupt me if you do. I just want to, a couple of years ago in 2018, it reminded me of when I went to Italy. I was in a regatta in Italy. And what we did within the community is we found a chef that would teach us how to make pasta. And so there was like 30 of us that went in Florence. We found a place to go. And I just, I thought that was it's one of my favorite memories of being there. And so, yeah. And I know that I think in Winnipeg, isn't there a festival where Ukrainian or grandmothers teach you how to make Ukrainian bread or something? Like it's a big draw. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Dancia?
It's Danica. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. My name's Danica, and I guess my biggest question is when trying to get people interested, I feel like your main piece of advice was like figure out what their values are and what makes your community kind of like niche. But what would be your best recommendation on how to go about doing that? Like, do you put out a survey? Do you ask people on social media? Like, how do you really figure out what your community cares about?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of different ways. Like, like go to the equivalent of like a digital bulletin board, and find out what is it that people are interested in. What clubs do you have available? Do you have a thriving theater community? There are ways that you can find that out just through your own networks and connections. But I would put it out as a direct question to people. If we were to develop a festival that showcased our community, what would the things be that you think would be attractive to visitors? Something like that.
Does that help, Danica?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't know if that was like something that you would recommend, like putting just out there in the open. Like I'm from a really small like country community, but we're just on the border of the town of Oromocto, which is like a huge military base, but then we also have a reserve. So we kind of have like the country farmer folk, and then we have the big military base, and then we also have a lot of First Nation community. So kind of like a big variety of locals. And so trying to figure out what does everyone care about? Like, what do we all have in common here that we could base like an event off of? So I guess,
Hmm.
yeah, just posting on social media maybe and like asking the question and seeing if people respond.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes it's not just commonalities that you're looking for. Maybe the military base is interested in something that the other community is offering, and you just don't know. And would it be interesting to actually put those three different communities together and say, this is what we're offering, these bizarre configurations, because you may end up with really innovative programming as a result of that. Anyway, like I would just be totally open about it, because the last thing you want is to feel like you're telling people what you want to do, and you're telling them that they all have to agree or there has to be some kind of consensus. So, maybe don't ask the question about what do we have in common at this point, but what's really niche, what's unique about the community.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? There's nothing in chat right now either. Well, Marie, thank you so much. I was captivated, honestly. I just found it really interesting.
Oh,
Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience. And Nora, thank you for allowing us both to be here and share this information with your group.